Everyone, welcome to my video about roles versus claims versus policy. First of all, I want to thank you for 200 subscribers, and this will be my video of explaining this topic, which many of you have asked for, and I don't think I have really given a compelling explanation. So this is what this video is going to be about, trying to explain roles, claims, policy, when do you want to use what, and hopefully give you a better understanding when you want to accomplish a task, what do you want to turn it to? Okay, so roles versus claims versus policy. What's the difference? What's up, right? Boom. Okay, so let's start with roles. Roles is essentially a Boolean type. I want you to think of it as a Boolean type because a role, the user is either in it or he isn't, right? And the role either protects a function or it doesn't, right? So you have some sort of functionality and you have some sort of user. So if the user is in a role, he has access to the function that the role protects as well, right? So the role essentially encapsulates the user and the function. So this is essentially just a little diagram I used. As you can see, my MS skills are improving. But yeah, essentially this is what role is. So you have a role, you have the users that are in the role, and they have access to these functions. All right. Claims. Claims are a little bit different. Well, not a little bit. They're entirely different. They're a key value pair. So if you look at this claim bubble here, essentially this is an email. So you're specifying a key or a type. So you can say it's an email, it's a username, it's an image. You can have all sorts of claims, right? And this claim belongs to a user or an entity, and claims are used to describe that entity, right? So they're essentially user properties. And they tell the program or the context in which they're used something about the user. So that's what claims are. And if we go to policies, they're just functions. Policies are just functions which are, they basically start here with the context. And when we make a request to a page which is protected by a policy, they go to this policy and it's essentially a function which basically takes this context and it looks at it and it goes, right, this is the user, he's trying to access this thing. And right, let's check the database files or however you configure this function to work. It's gonna execute it, and then it's gonna say either right, you're good to go, or sorry, buddy, you're not allowed to go here, and it's gonna give you a 403. Okay, so let's go ahead and I've set up a project here. This project I'm gonna make it available on GitHub, so you can go on and download it. And let's first take a look at roles. Let's take a look at the setup of the project. So in startup, this is the default template kind of thing. And let's make the code a little bit bigger, like so. Right. So essentially, I have my identity set up here and some policies as well, but we'll go drill into them a little bit more in detail later on. And then in the program CS file, I essentially seed an admin user, and for that admin user I create an admin role. Okay, so let's fire this up. I'll put it to the side here and I'll create another window. I'll just put it to the side here. Okay, so what's happening here while it's loading up, it is going to create a database called let me refresh this actually, authorization tutorial, and you can find the connection string for this in the app settings.json. Here it is, this database and the server that it's pointing to. So if you have Visual Studio installed, you should have this local database. Okay, so let's bring this up again and let me log out here because I already was testing this and was logged in. Okay, So essentially what we have to start with, let's open this up, tables, and let's look at the users. We have this one admin user here, admin@test.com. So let's go ahead and log in. There we go, and I have these two roots on top, right? So role test is essentially a page that I've set up to so the index page will essentially grab all the users and display their roles, right? And you have your roles as well. So we can go ahead and create something like manager at test.com, right? So this is going to be a manager user, right? So now that we have created this manager user, he's going to appear here, and by default I set the password to password to easier to be able to access these accounts easier. So, and then we can go ahead and create a role manager, okay? And we can do something sort of grab this manager, grab the manager role and add the role, or we can also add the role to the admin. So admin can have manager and admin role, or we can go ahead and remove the role. So all this functionality, I'm not going to go over the functionality. It's pretty much self-explanatory, and it's all in this one controller. So I haven't split it up into any files. Everything is in here, and everything is relatively simple. So for now, we're going to focus on roles, role access, and that sort of thing. So for now, I have this controller protected with the admin role, right? So I created this manager user, and I gave him a role of manager, okay? So let me go ahead, copy this URL, go into here, and let's say manager@test.com, password. Okay, and you see the access is denied. So I'm trying to access this page and it's denied. So essentially, again, a role is a boolean, right? So manager@test.com. Is he a manager? Yes. Is the roles in test allowed for managers? No. Okay. So going into policies, we can use the roles to enforce policies. So again, policies are functions, and we can basically, we give this function a name, something like admin access, and right, we say policy that the user will require role of admin, right? So this is admin access. So if we go to the policy test, here I have three pages, sorry, admin page, which will, let's go into policy controller. So we have the admin page, which has admin access, which is right here, manager access, which is going to check that the user is either in a role of admin or manager, and user access is admin, manager, or user role, right? So we can go ahead and also go into roles test, add a user at test.com. Let's create this user. Let's create a user role, and let's grab this user and give him a role as well, right? So being a manager, you can access the user page and you can access the manager page, but you cannot access the admin page. And being an admin, you can access the user page, manager page, and admin page. So again, going back to the presentation. So our role, as you can see, encapsulates this function of, for now, the roles controller. So this whole class and all the function in it are, all the functions are protected by this role. So all these functions belong here to this role, and all the users that are in this admin role have access to these functions, right? And then we have the policy. So the policy has access to the context, and the context is pretty much the current state of the user in the ASP.NET Core application, right? And the database, we can, when I create, it's possible to create filters, and I'm gonna, not filters, but handlers. I will show you how we do that in claims policy. But essentially, you can see that here we're creating functions where we're able to manipulate the role and basically provide some additional function based on the role. So saying things like, right, the function is now protected, or rather your access is depending on your role, and more than one role can be involved in determining whether you have access or not. Okay, so let me close all of these documents. Let me stop the application, and let's go ahead and go into claims. So claims is pretty much the same. I have the program file here, which essentially says create admin claim, manager claim, and date started claim. Manager and admin claim are going to be pretty much useless here. And essentially I'm saying, right, if you run this project first, add these claims, and if you've run the other project, just add the claims to this user, which is admin at test, the one we see in roles. And I have the app settings, it's pointing to the same database. So everything that you have created in the previous project will be retained for this claims project as well. Okay, so what am I doing different in this project? So based on claims, so I have this claims controller, right? And I have this year's work, right? So what is this year's work? This is my custom filter, type filter, and it's a type of authorization filter. So if you know anything about middleware in, or rather not middleware, filters in .NET Core, authorization filters are executed first before any other filters. So this is what's going to be executed before it grants you access to this method, right? So what am I doing in this filter? In this filter, I'm getting the context. I'm getting the user. So I'm checking, is he authenticated? If not, I return an unauthorized result. And then I'm basically getting the date started. So I've basically set up this project to imitate the functionality of giving out rewards to users based on how long they worked at the company. You can also say how long they've been signed up to your website, how long they've been doing something, right? So it's trying to mimic or implement that functionality, okay? And this is what I'm doing. I'm basically checking for claims, and I'm looking for this date started. I'm getting the value, and all I'm doing is I'm performing some logic in this authorization filter, right? So you might take, if you're catching on to, if you remembered where policies were, you might think, right, why are you not using a function, or rather, why are you not using the policy function? Isn't that what it's made for? Well, yeah, that is what it's made for, but imagine if you didn't have policies, this is what you would have to do. You would have to create a filter, and this is what you would have to do, right? So claims policy, I have these pages that are, no, not in this policy page, but they're here, and then I have links. So let's go ahead and fire this one up. I'll put it here to the side, and I'm gonna take this here. I'm actually gonna close this. Okay. So let me log out and let me log back in as admin. Okay. Now let's go to roles test. Is it the same website? Yeah, it is. Pardon. So I'm gonna select a different project to run. Let me fire this up. So now that this project is run, let's go ahead into our database again, and let's look at ASP.NET user claims, right? So this is where it's gonna essentially create the claims for our user. So you can see the user ID, and this is the admin ID, right? This is the claims that is created, okay? So let me open up this window now. Put it here. Let's log in as admin.test, right? And let me log in as manager at test.com. Password. So this manager, we're still pointing. Remember, we're still pointing to the same database. So I have access to this login on a different website. Okay. So let's go to claims.test, and here you can see all different claims, right? And here are the 3 claims that I have added manually, and here you can see this role, right? That is essentially stating the role. So when we assigned our user to the role of admin, it has translated to this as well. So if we go on our manager, you can see that the role is still a claim, right? But just because of the implementation in ASP.NET Core and its semantical meaning, role is still this bubble that encapsulates the users and the functionality in this bubble. Okay. So going forward, have we worked 2 years? Yes. By the way, I have set the in my program.cs when I seeded the um, claims. I have set the date started for my admin user in 2010, so it's 2019 right now. So he's essentially worked 9 years. Okay, so we will be able to access 2 years, 5 years, and 10 years. So 5 years, no problem, 10 years, and we get a 401 unauthenticated. Right, and if we go on our manager, we try to visit the 2 years, might probably get an exception, right? Because we don't have this claim. And I'll probably need to implement something to handle that functionality. Okay. Now, I essentially then went ahead and said, right, why am I creating my own authorized attribute? I can create a filter, a policy handler, so a policy function that will handle this for me. Okay. So in my startup, I have this. So essentially, what I'm doing is I'm creating a requirement, which is minimum years worked requirement, and I'm passing some kind of value to it, and then I am using this requirement. Let me put this to new lines. I can't because it's running. All right, so I have this minimum year requirement here, and based on this requirement, I'm essentially doing the same thing I'm doing in this attribute. So you will see that these functions look very, very similar. All right. I'm doing the same thing, except how it returns the completed status is a little bit different. But yeah, essentially it's doing the same thing. It's taking this claim, date started, and it's checking its value based on the value that we have registered here, right? So when in my startup, when I define these policies, worked 2 years, worked 5 years, I give names to these functions, right? And then I create this parameter, which is then implemented by this handler. Okay, so this would look like this in my policy. So essentially what it's saying, before accessing this controller, you have to go through this function, right? So if we again go to policy test, we're now at policy, and if we go to 2 years, we have access, 5 years, we have access, 10 years, we get an unauthorized, right? So policy is really, again, it's a function that can use either roles or claims or database based on the user that's accessing. It can either provide you access or deny you access to functions. All right, and if we go to here, policy, 2 years, and again it crashes because we don't have claims, so you potentially want to be implementing this check. Okay, so this will be essentially it for this episode, and let's again, just as a refresher, go back to these roles and go over these slides again after you've seen the project and how I attempted to tackle some of the tasks. Again, roles. Roles encapsulate functions and users. So if you have an admin control panel, it would make sense to have an admin role and protect all those functions with an admin role. Okay, so if you have a specific amount of functions and you want those functions to be only available to certain users, you might want to opt in for roles, right? But You can also assign claims, so you can actually just create a claim role called roles, and you can put whatever claims you want in there. And really, it's up to you to decide which to pick, claims or roles, based on the semantical meaning of how Microsoft defines it in ASP.NET Core, right? So role is this thing which has users and functions uh, assigned to this role. And the claims are something that define a user, right? So I don't think you necessarily want to mix them. You either want to pick one or two. So claims are essentially provide you the functionality of roles in the long term, but they also provide you with a little bit more customizability because it's a key value pair. So you can have, as you've seen, how many years have you worked for? It can give you that level of authorizing functions, all right? And policies are essentially those functions which they're basically saying based on who's accessing, they're going to perform some tasks and they're going to say, right, you're either allowed to do it or not. So policies essentially, they don't have anything to do with roles or claims. They use roles and claims to decide whether you have access or not. Okay, so the real question here is, should you be using roles and claims? And that's for you to decide in your application. Based on the application that you're building, do you need the flexibility of claims, or are you okay with just having roles and securing and delegating access to functions based on the roles? Or do you need to know that the user has some sort of a value assigned to, like an email, if or a domain, if you come from a different domain, so you might have a Windows authentication in your company, and you might say, right, one users come from one domain, another users come from another domain. So based on the domain, we're going to delegate access, or based on your role or access level, that sort of thing. So if you're in a big company and you're building a big application, claims might be your pick. If you're building something small and you don't need a lot of flexibility and you literally just need to secure a function, and when a user comes in and you want to give them access to these functions, you might be okay with going for roles, and if you don't need a big level of configuration. So this will be it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I'd love to answer your questions. If you enjoyed this video, like, subscribe. I do a lot of cool tutorials on my channel, not only .NET Core, but also Vue.js, and there's going to be a lot more videos to come. So if you want to stick around, don't forget to subscribe. And hopefully I'll see you around in my other videos. Have a good day.